I would like to introduce our first speaker. And I have to put my glasses on because it makes me more resilient. I'm sorry, that poem really moved me again. So, Captain Kimberly Elenberg, and actually I asked David, my business partner, to make this on 20-point type so I could read it without my glasses, and I can't read it without my glasses. So, Captain Kimberly Elenberg, RN, Doctor of Nursing, is an informaticist, a leader in public health policy, an educator, and a front-runner of national prevention strategies. Her leadership in this field has led her to work across the Department of Defense, the White House, and Health and Human Services to advance health policy across the federal government, resulting in recognition by the Secretary of Defense with the Correspondence Excellence Award. Kimberly advises the Office of the Secretary of Defense on comprehensive strategy for optimizing the well-being and resilience of our service members, their families, and the entire Department of Defense community. Outside of her career, she is a strong supporter of community service and has served on community and national boards and provided leadership for many diverse organizations. Elenberg earned a bachelor's degree in nursing at Temple on a 4-year ROTC scholarship and a master's degree in informatics from the University of Maryland, and graduated summa cum laude with a doctorate in nursing practice from the Johns Hopkins University. Kimberly's, of course. As Kimberly explained in the art exhibit, she just came back from a deployment. I think that will be part of what she talks about tonight. But Kimberly is also going to be riding on our bike ride tomorrow. So she's a speaker, she's an artist, and she's a bike rider. So I think that she gets the MVP for this weekend, Ceiling Vet Weekend. So without further ado, Kimberly?
Well, first of all, there's a few thank yous I need to get off my chest so that I can focus. So first I want to thank Brian, my significant other, who drove down from Washington, D.C. to join me today. So thank you, Brian. And most of all, I would really like to thank you and Allison for thinking about Rose Haven. As he said, one of the things I do is I lead an effort called Total Force Fitness, meaning mind, body, and spirit, for the Department of Defense. And what I look at are what are the requirements to really support mind, body, and spirit, what are our capabilities, and what are the gaps. And then we work on solutions. And one of the biggest challenges for the Department of Defense is that we have historically looked at those things that we can affect, that we have authority over. We're really great at things like chain of command and DOTIs, Department of Defense instructions, and things like that. But most of our people don't live on base. And if you think about resilience and what builds resilience, it's where you live, it's where you work, it's where you play. And so since most of our folks don't live on an installation, it was really important for us to figure out where do they actually live. What counties are dense with these populations? And how healthy are those counties from a mind, body, spirit perspective? And so I used the analytics and the math background that I have to build models to help us really identify and understand the health-related quality of life of those DoD communities at the county level within states. And I can tell you, and this goes to my thank you, so I haven't actually really started my presentation at all, that coming here to this community and seeing how you all rally, not just now, but during the hurricanes, because when the hurricanes occurred, Allison, who I work with at the Pentagon, was really worried. She was so worried about the community here. And, you know, hearing about the woman who cooks the food, the man who delivers the food, looking at how the veteran communities come together and support each other to create the art, looking at the restoration here, it makes me want to be a part of this community. So my biggest thank you goes to the community here for welcoming us, for welcoming Rose Haven, and giving us an opportunity to be a part of this community, because it's really quite fantastic. So I just want to, really thank you guys. So typically what we do as a thank you, or what I have historically done as a thank you, is push-ups, right? So growing up, I'm 25 years active duty. And back in the day, some of the tradition in the Army, because that's where I started out, I grew up in an orphanage as a social orphan. I'm very lucky to have the family that I have. My mother, my grandparents had passed. They didn't know where my dad was. My mother had breast cancer in both breasts, 2 different types. She gave my brother and I up to an orphanage called the Milton Hershey School, so she could ensure we had an education, that we would have health insurance, and that was very difficult for her to do. She was scared and alone fighting breast cancer, but thought greater than herself. So when you want to talk about resiliency, I can tell you I would not be standing here today if it were not for my family. I have other family that came in between World War I and World War II, and through my first marriage, family that is here as Holocaust survivors. And they all taught me the value of resilience, and it came down to 2 simple things at the time. And that was, number 1, you need to have a skill so you can survive, so you can feel a sense of purpose, so you can be a part of the community, so you can give back, so you can take care of yourself and your family. And the second thing that they taught me is to appreciate the small things. Going simply to just get a Coca-Cola is a really big deal for some of my family members. And if you can appreciate the small things, it really makes dealing with life a lot easier. So that's the beginning and not the end, but at least a pause in my thank you. So thank you to my family, thank you to the communities, thank you to Allison and Rob for letting me be here today. So like I said, the big focus for us is mind, body, and spirit. And when you look at mind, body, and spirit, and you look at veterans, it's not really different than those of you who haven't served. We all have a story. We all, I mean, if you really think about it, nobody ever said life was going to be easy, right? And so it does truly take a community. It takes the experiences and the life of everyone to really come together and be strong. I think one of the things that I really like about Rosehaven, when they think about mind, body, and spirit, it's how do we operationalize it. If you really think about it, it's not passive, right? It's what do we do? How do we show love? How do we give love? How do we build skills? So when we talk about it in the Department of Defense, one of the things I think we have a moral and ethical responsibility to do is not just say, is a service member ready to deploy because they know how to fire a weapon and they've gotten their vaccines and their eye inserts, right, or their glasses. It has to be bigger than that. It has to be comprehensive and holistic. Not only are they ready to deploy, can they complete a deployment? Do they have the will, the spirit, to be able to complete it? And then can they reintegrate well into the community when they come back and their family, and put the uniform on and go back out the door again? And so that's how we are evolving in the Department of Defense. It's to ask those questions. And some of the tools we're looking at help us identify that. We say, okay, if you deploy, what does it take to reset? And it's not the same for everyone. And it's really important. Oh Lord, sorry, that's my fault. But it's really important to look at this and say, not just, are you ready, once you've completed a deployment, have you dwelled enough, have you had the opportunity to process this and to grow from it, right, before you go out the door again. We're also looking at, when do you get rusty? Right? You're part of something bigger than you. We have 9 domains that we look at. We know finances plays a big role. We know your social relationships, your ability to have a community plays a huge role quantitatively. We know spirituality, this sense of being part of something bigger than you, a sense of purpose, plays a huge role. That's one of our biggest challenges, because where do people get that from? For some people, it's religion. For many people, it's not religion. It might be from your buddies, from being part of a bigger team. It's unique for everybody. And so I guess really what I would say is I'm no subject matter on resilience. I'm very lucky to have had the life I had and the family I've had. But I would say more than anything that community plays that key role in helping individuals find a sense of purpose. I'll give you one story, and I think I'm coming close to my time. I'm waiting for the card to come up, because once I start talking, I could just go forever. But, you know, for me personally, as a mom and a woman, tied back to the poem that you read, right? I was in the military before I became a mom. Part of being resilient for me, and I think for many of my female colleagues, is the ability to know that our families are going to be okay, just as much as we're going to be okay. And I remember the first time I had to go out for training, my son was having surgery on his ear, and I could not be there. And I was scared to death. He was 1 year old, you know. And my mom was able to be there for me. She helped form that community, and she was there with my husband, right? When I got older and I was deployed, I had my husband in the Middle East with my other children. My mother had my oldest son, and he had to come back before I could get another person to stay with him. And he called me. We had satellite phones. And he said, Mom, I'm really hungry. And there's nothing in the house. There's no hot dogs. There's no eggies. And I was really worried, because how could I concentrate on my job as a service member if my kid was home and hungry, right? This was really, really working on my ability to be resilient. So I said to him, I said, Stephen, go look in the freezer. See what's in there. He said, Mom, there's a round piece of meat and there's a flat piece of meat. I said, well, it sounds like a brisket and a roast. I said, you want the roast. Briskets take too long to cook. He took the roast out, and he was crying. He felt overwhelmed. I can't do this. He's 12 years old, right? Home alone. Mrs. DeWares is across the street. And I'm like, oh God, please, right? Because I have this whole mission. I'm an officer in charge of running a mission. But my kid is hungry and home alone, and how am I going to do this? Because my kid is not reaching out to the community across the street. So I said, Stephen, I'm going to text you how to do it, because he couldn't hear, he was too upset. I called him 24 hours later, I was able to get the sat phone again. Mom, it came out great. I made the roast beef like you told me. I seared it, I roasted it, it was medium rare. I got my first girlfriend. He ate all $23 worth of that meat in one setting with the neighbor lady across the street's daughter. That was something that helped me with resiliency. It was to know, number one, that I had the neighbors across the street that could look in on the kids. Number two, Henry was coming because my spouse was out, my mom couldn't come, you know. But number three, that my child, right, was able to grow and be stronger because of my experience. None of us, if things are just handed to us, if we don't work to earn it, if we don't feel a sense of purpose, then we don't build that resiliency. So having the opportunity, offering the opportunity to contribute, to grow, to have that sense of purpose, really does help with resiliency. I can tell you my son did grow up successfully, thank God. He's 26, he'll be 27 next week. He lives in New York City, and he just did his first off-Broadway play. He's really excited. So I have to tell you that I'm grateful, and maybe that's a silly story, but you know, when I deployed down at the border, you know, you continue to face different challenges throughout your life. As I shared before, it was a really unique deployment. And believe me, I wanted to put in my sea bag a number of children and bring them home. And truthfully, I am looking into fostering some. And I am looking into possibly adopting them. I know we have to talk about it, but it was really hard to come from a situation where I grew up as a social orphan in an orphanage, right? And be given those opportunities to have somebody like Mr. Hershey. Mr. Hershey and Catherine could not have kids. Every time you buy a chocolate bar, you're supporting the school that helps 2,300 of these orphans and social orphans, right? Had that not been in place, I would not be here today. Had not the program at Temple University that allowed kids, I didn't have, you know, you heard that I graduated summa cum laude, right, from Johns Hopkins. It makes me sound like a smarty pants. I am no smarty pants. I have significant learning disabilities. I was told I would never go to college when I went to Milton Hershey, and I took food service because my house mother put garlic in everything. The pancakes even. It was disgusting. So I took food service so I could learn how to cook. And, you know, having those opportunities offered by the community allowed my mom to heal. My mom ended up surviving. She went on to get her doctorate in education. She put her foot so far up my hiney she wasn't going to not let me get a doctorate. But, you know, I guess, you know, the point I'm trying to say here is that we are all humans, veterans, individuals like yourselves. None of us can do it alone. We all have a story to tell. Life is not easy. And if we want to be resilient, we have to nurture the mind, the body, and the spirit. And opportunities to do that are abound. This is a community that rises to the occasion. I do applaud you, and I do applaud you. So I don't know, do we have an opportunity to open the floor for questions?
After the other speaker.
After the other speaker, okay. So I think, sir, with that, unless there's something else you'd like me to say, I'm good.
Thank you, Rachel. Kimberly, you're Rachel. So I first met Kimberly through Allison, and we all have met somebody through Allison. And her Total Force Fitness program is a really remarkable program. There are 9 domains, and each of those domains contribute individually as well as collectively to this mind, body, and spirit. We've sort of adapted that Total Force Fitness program, and we're starting to think about how to make it a total life fitness program for us to run at Rosehaven when we start getting people in there. But the program that Kimberly works with is phenomenal, and she does, as you can probably see, she does a great job.